My brother and I have always been intrigued by the unexplainable. Like many, we're fascinated with stories of the supernatural, fringe science, and modern-day mysteries.
Though we've seen no first-hand proof of its existence, our minds remain open to the possibility.
Unsatisfied with the so-called evidence on television and the internet, we are choosing to take matters into our own hands and conduct our own interviews and research.
Now we're on a quest to speak with as many people as we can and hear the stories of these events from those who have lived them.
No Hollywood effects or exaggerations, and no hidden agenda. We invite you to listen and decide what and who you believe.
We are the Brothers Mysterium.
Hello and welcome to the Brothers Mysterium. My name is Tommy. This is the Brothers Mysterium, and we are the #1 rated commercial-free paranormal podcast on the planet. And if you enjoy the podcast, I'd like to kindly ask you to take a moment to rate and review us on whatever podcast provider you use. And while you're at it, why not follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Mysterium Bros. Head on over to Facebook if you're still on the book. Give us a like, facebook.com/The Brothers Mysterium. And now that we've gotten the business portion out of the way, let's get into out of the body. That's right, today's episode, all about out-of-body experiences and astral projection. And you might be asking yourself, what exactly is an out-of-body experience? Well, sometimes referred to as an OBE or an OOBE, an out-of-body experience is a phenomenon in which a person perceives the world from a location outside their physical body. One type of out-of-body experience is astral travel or astral projection. And that is a term used in esotericism to describe an intentional out-of-body experience that assumes the existence of a soul, called an astral body, that is separate from the physical body and capable of traveling outside it throughout the universe. So, you got your out-of-body experience when you're perceiving the world from outside your body, and when you intentionally do so, that is astral projection. You're using your soul, your astral body, your astral form to zip around the universe. How cool is that? And there are basically two schools of thought. First, there's the focus on the physical, using the scientific medical explanation, which is that OBEs can be induced by traumatic brain injuries, sensory deprivation, near-death experiences, as we've covered numerous times on this podcast, as well as dissociative and psychedelic drugs, dehydration, sleep disorders, dreaming, and electrical stimulation of the brain, among other causes. It can also be deliberately induced by some people. 1 in 10 people have an OBE at least once in their life. And psychologists and neuroscientists regard OBEs as dissociative experiences arising from different psychological and neurological factors. So if you'll take what we'll call the skeptic, or perhaps the less harsher logical medical explanation, they say this is something physiologically that's happening neurologically within your body and can be explained, such as sensory deprivation, near-death experiences where it's very, very common, even dreaming, people thinking that perhaps they left their body when it's just a very vivid dream. But pretty much they're saying the science is there to prove that this is not your soul, your astral body, actually leaving anything. It's just something that's happening internally and your perception's a bit off. But it can be explained psychologically, neurologically, and physiologically. On the other end of the spectrum, there are those who believe that astral projection, sometimes called spirit walking, is true. It really is happening. Your soul, your astral body, is actually leaving your physical form and traveling through the universe. It's not in your mind. It's not caused by a brain injury or something traumatic happening. It is truly possible. It is something we can all do. They say astral projection is an out-of-body experience that assumes the existence of one or more non-physical planes of existence and an associated body beyond the physical. Commonly, such planes are called astral, etheric, or spiritual. Astral projection is often experienced as the spirit or astral body leaving the physical body to travel the spirit world on the astral plane. And that is what you hear about when somebody says, I lie down. A lot of times it's closely related, at least to me, with how people describe some sleep paralysis where there's this feeling of vibration and then all of a sudden boom, you just are detached from your physical form. You may or may not see yourself laying in bed, sleeping, lying down as you travel around and explore places. So either way, I guess, no matter what you believe, people seem to say the same thing. They are exiting their body, often looking at themselves, looking at other places, hovering around an area, maybe somewhere they've been, maybe somewhere they haven't. I guess the real argument would be, is it them truly on the astral plane? Have they really astral projected and their spirit form is traveling around? Or is it just something medically, internally going on with your brain that is causing you to think you are? So, like many topics on this particular podcast, two distinct beliefs as to what is going on. We're going to talk to some people and try to figure it out for our damn selves. And my guest today, co-host, is none other than Caitlin, who you might remember from episode 19, Psychic Census Part 2, Psychic Sessions. So Caitlin, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here for this episode.
Yes, we're very excited to have you, this time in the co-host seat. So just for those who may not have listened to your episode yet, I'm sure many will go back and listen. My first question is just sort of, where do you fall on the skeptic meter? Are you a believer? Are you open to the paranormal? Do you think it's all explained easily enough by logic, science, medicine? Where are your beliefs at?
Right. I think my first approach is always to see what can be the reason for natural causes. But that even if there are possibilities for the natural cause, doesn't negate a possibility of something extra paranormal. But overall, I mean, I'm definitely open to it after having a few experiences of my own. But it's too hard for me to think that there are so many liars or delusional people out there. I think there's too much out there unexplained, and to think that we know everything already as humans is extremely hubristic, I guess.
Sure.
But yeah, so I think it kind of goes both ways. I think it's always it makes the most sense to go for the most physical, practical answer first, and then go from there. And that, like I said, doesn't negate necessarily, but it's good to put all factors on the table when considering what's going on.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. My next question for you is one I love to ask everybody that I meet, basically. Have you ever seen a ghost, an alien, a UFO, anything crazy?
Not a ghost, thank God, because that is my number one fear. But I did see something that I couldn't explain. It was very quick, but it wasn't a drone. It wasn't a flashlight. It wasn't. I don't even really know. And I was with someone else at the time, and it was just three lights that just suddenly went 1, 2, 3 up in the sky. I just couldn't explain what it was. And obviously 3 lights going up in the sky doesn't sound like much, but, I think for most people, once you see something, it makes you think a little bit more. But, I do not wish to see or hear a ghost. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a pretty common answer I get from people. So sort of playing into the idea of ghosts, and this is a tough question to answer, but there is no right or wrong answer. It's just I'm always interested in people's thoughts. What do you believe happens when we die?
That is a good question. Well, I mean, there's the one possibility where your body energy just becomes heat, and then that's all over. But I don't really think that. And again, it kind of stems from I just can't possibly think that there's so many liars or delusional people out there. I think that there's a lot of experiences, briefly dying, or I forget what the term is there, but when you come back, I don't know. And then I do believe that ghosts exist, so there's something there. I don't know what the answer is. It's very hard for me to think that when we die, it's game over. I think that the possibility of that being the answer is much harder for me to digest than the possibility that there's something that I don't even understand that goes on after.
Right. Yeah, that's the ultimate question that I think everybody, whether they believe in the paranormal or not, everybody sort of wants to know what happens next, what happens when we die. So not an easy one to answer.
Right.
And then today we'll be obviously discussing out-of-body experiences, astral projection. Have you ever had an OBE or have you ever astral projected?
Not that I can say for any sort of certainty. Like, it sounds like some other people feel like, I guess if it actually happens to you, it is a very solid, concrete feeling of knowing that it happened. I mean, I've definitely had dreams that were extremely vivid, extremely clear, and like premonition dreams, but have I had an out-of-body experience fully? No, I can't say for certainty. I've definitely had a meditation scenario where my body was shaking, but that's a whole other topic. But yeah, so have I projected out of my body? I would have to say no.
Gotcha. Yeah, and you've touched on a lot of things we'll get to in this episode, such as the vibration, sensation, feeling your body shaking, and also like lucid dreams. I mean, that's one thing that always seems to cloud the water a bit is dreams, because it is very easy to lay in bed and maybe you're trying to astral project or not, and then you sort of start seeing yourself float up. But again, it's like, were you actually leaving your body? Were you just half asleep? Did you completely dream it? So dreams are always a shady area when it's hard to tell what really happened. I think a lot of people have had somewhat out-of-body experiences. Like the more common one is like, you're in a sports game or you're giving a speech, and then you kind of see yourself doing it more than you're in your own body. I know I've had that when like delivering a speech or something. And then you kind of touched on this too about the death question, which is the classic near-death experience where a lot of people will say they saw themselves laying on the pavement and people rushing over, or, they were in the hospital and heard the doctors discussing their prognosis. And that again, it's like, well, did they hear it while they were laying on the hospital bed and they were physically just heard it? Or, as they claim, were they truly floating above their own body when it happened? We'll never know because we weren't them, but we can definitely talk to some people and figure out what they know, what experiences they've had, which leads me to my first guest. When it comes to astral projection, out-of-body experiences, I actually have a friend who has studied it and is more knowledgeable than I, so I sat down with my friend Brooke and we discussed it.
All right, sounds good.
The Brothers Mysterium.
Thank you so much for joining us here today on The Brothers Mysterium, and we will start at the beginning. Could you, in your own words, tell us what is an out-of-body experience?
It's an experience when you're conscious and your soul or spirit leaves your physical body when you're either sleeping or you could be awake at the time that it happens. And there's different types of out-of-body experiences. So it could just be your psychosoma, as we call it, or your soul or your spirit leaving your body, or it could be just your consciousness, like a point of light leaving your body, which is obviously much more rare.
What initially got you interested in out-of-body experiences, looking into them, reading about them, researching them?
Actually, the organization that I found happened to study out-of-body experience, but I was more interested in the consciousness part of it. Who are we as a consciousness? Why are we born in this physical body and this time to the family we're born to? And so that led into the projectology, as they call it, which is the study of the projection or out-of-body experience as a way to study all of those things, to kind of learn more from an extra-physical vantage point who we are, who we were before we were born, and things like that we could never access otherwise.
Now, did that lead you down a road that eventually led to Dr. Waldo Vieira in South America?
Yes. First, in New York City is where I found the organization to begin with. I took a class at the Learning Annex, and I was searching for something, didn't know exactly what, so I was taking a bunch of different classes at the time. And I went to a lecture that Dr. Vieira wasn't there because he lived in Brazil, but it was this husband and wife team. She was Brazilian, he was American, and they were talking about all different things. I don't even remember what they said, but I remember how I felt. I felt so clear and so amazing, and it was like nothing I had ever felt, and I was like euphoric. And I said to them, like, why am I feeling this way? And they said, oh, we exteriorized energy before you come in, so we make the energy really positive, a really positive environment, so that you're more apt to, feel it and to feel comfortable and to learn better and things like that. So that was like all I needed. That was it. And I was off and running with that organization for like 8 years, studying to be a teacher, going to Brazil. But I had a lot of synchronicities that happened to me during that time period.
And then we had talked off mic, and I believe you had said that around this time, shortly after, you and some friends were going to attend another lecture, and it ended up that one of your friends, who just so happened to be a psychic, was unable to come. They weren't feeling that well. So isn't there a story where once you found out that they weren't coming, they didn't feel good, you wanted to reach out to them psychically? Could you expand on what happened there?
So we decided to send good energy to this girl that didn't feel well. And since she's psychic, we thought maybe she would be able to tell if we were sending her energy. So we noted the time. We didn't really know what we were doing. We were in a coffee shop in Manhattan. And so I just pictured white light going from my heart to hers, picturing her really happy and glowing. And next thing you know, I felt my entire body was completely like vibrating like nothing I ever felt. It was like someone plugged me into an electrical socket. And I stopped it after a couple seconds and I said, "You guys, something just happened to me." And they were like, what? And I said, "I don't know, but it was really good, whatever it was." So I went in the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I remember saying to myself, "You are more than the physical body. Now you know for sure whatever just happened to you was not physical." And I still didn't understand it though. Then the next week, Dr. Vieira happened to be in town. So I went to see a lecture he was giving, and he was talking about, well, actually, I don't remember what he was talking about. He had such a thick accent, I kept zoning out. I wasn't really paying attention. And then all of a sudden, he said, "The key to everything is a vibrational state, and that is when your entire body vibrates like this." And I was like, "Oh, that just happened to me." So it was the best synchronicity ever. And then also I had like my head pulling back while I was trying to go to sleep and work with energy. And then I went to another class where they said, "Oh, well, the nuchal chakra has the silver cord which attaches the bodies together, the soul and the physical body, so that when you're out and about having an out-of-body experience, you come back to your body. When the cord is severed, that's death, and you don't come back to your body. But no one's going to come with an extra physical pair of scissors and cut the cord." Yeah, exactly. That's what they always told us. Don't worry. So that explained why my head always would feel like it was pulling back on the pillow when I was trying to have an out-of-body experience.
So now, how did you end up in Brazil, and what happened while you were there?
I took a lot of other classes in the U.S. and then and I was studying to be a teacher with them, like I said. And then I got laid off from my job. I went to Brazil for a few months and I kept extending it. And I ended up there for 9 months over a 3-year period. And I learned Portuguese and got immersed in the culture, and I stayed most of my time at this self-research lab in the middle of the farmland in Iguaçu Falls, Brazil. So he picked that area because it's a natural epicenter of energy because of the falls that are there. And the soil is very rich also. It's this dark red soil. So all there was there was a cafeteria, a library, and a bunch of self-research labs. And where we slept was like 4 beds, no TVs, no nothing. And I did not miss anything, I have to say. And I would get up at 6 a.m. and go walking, and I would help with the bibliography of the book that they were writing, that Dr. Vieira was writing, Encyclopedia of the Consciousness. And so just spending that much time doing that, and then these self-research labs, there were a bunch of small ranch houses, that's what they looked like, built on the farmland around in a big circle, and there might have been like 12 of them, and they were each set up, the energy and physically, for certain purposes. So one was to help you remember your past lives, and it had music from all different eras, and they all had a chair and a bed and research material that you could look at and paper for writing. So the theory was, don't believe anything we say, have your own experiences, be your own scientific experiment, so then you know beyond a shadow of a doubt. Don't believe us, you can't believe anything you hear. Belief was like a bad word. It was all about experience. So I spent every day, most of my time, doing one lab after another. One, you sat and looked at a blank wall for 3 hours. That was interesting. Not allowed to like move, not allowed to scratch yourself or anything. So I had some incredible experiences there, like rainbow and all different stuff. You don't need any drugs for that.
I'm sure.
But Anyway, so it was the last lab that I was doing, and I was lying down in this mental soma lab, and that's the one that is the point of consciousness, that if you ever can have that kind of experience, it's really high level. But I was moving energy throughout my body and get it going faster and faster, and then I kind of started to fall asleep a little, and I woke up a little bit, just enough to be like, okay, I gotta move energy again. And as I did that, I was catapulted out of my body, like, I don't know, felt like 10 feet in front of me. And I was not dreaming. I was totally awake, but everything was dark. I couldn't see anything. And I was flailing around trying to figure out how to control this extra physical body. And I kept thinking, they taught us, think of where you want to go. Don't think of your body, because then you'll go back to it, because whatever you think about is where you go. So I didn't succeed in that, because I was thinking, I want to go out, I want to go away, and I didn't think of anything quick enough, and I went right back to my body. And I was so excited, though, because I had never had a fully conscious out-of-body experience like that before. I had had the vibrational state, but not the out-of-body experience. So that was pretty incredible. And I really miss Brazil, and I want to go back so bad.
Oh, I bet. Sounds incredible. And now, what are the benefits of an out-of-body experience? Like, why do so many people try to have one? I guess my question is almost like, what is the purpose of an out-of-body experience besides just, well, this was cool and trippy?
I would say the main purpose is to experience more about who you are, because we're so much more than the physical body that's just our vehicle that we drive around in. But I know beyond a shadow of a doubt from my experiences that we are so much more than that. And so, having an out-of-body experience and possibly finding out what you did before you were born, how you trained for this life, who were you before this life, what purpose do you have in this life? You can see in such a broader view, a hugely broader view, when you're outside your body than when you're in. We have such limited capacity. Our consciousness is so limited in this physical body.
For sure. Could you talk about the difference between astral projection and remote viewing?
I actually had a remote viewing episode once, but they are different, because remote viewing is where your consciousness is still in your body, really. It's sort of like it's going out like a tentacle almost, and peeking around and seeing what's happening in other places, but you're still in your body. Whereas the out-of-body experience, you're actually leaving your body. Your soul or your spirit is leaving the body.
Would you be down to share your remote viewing experience with us?
So I was at a retreat with that organization. We went away for the weekend to the shore, and we had finished up for the day, and I went up to my room, and I was lying there in bed, but I had a roommate. I didn't know where she was. I thought she was maybe downstairs having coffee. So I started working with energy, and I kind of sabotaged myself, saying, oh, she's going to come back soon, and I don't want to be leaving my body before, meanwhile, it had only happened once. Actually, I had never had one at that point. And so I slowed it down, but my face was flushed. I was feeling so much energy. And then I had this vision that was so much more real than the average daydream, because it was remote viewing, that a big spotlight was going through the town where we were. And it was a different type of town. I knew it was there because it was different colored Victorian houses that were very distinct. So I saw the spotlight going around all the different houses, and my eyes were just following them around and around and around across these houses. And then all of a sudden the light came back and shined right in my eye. And I was like, whoa, what was that light doing there? It's very interactive, for a daydream, which it wasn't. So I couldn't explain it. And a couple minutes later, my roommate came back, and I said, oh, were you downstairs having coffee? And she said, oh, no, I was out at the beach with a couple other girls. And we were just sitting there watching the waves come in. And then all of a sudden, this big truck with these huge lights came on the beach and shined right in our eyes. And we were like, what is that light doing there? And I was like, oh my God, that just happened to me, because I was worried about her, and that's where my consciousness went. And I could not believe that. And it continued throughout that night, that I was lying there, and the things she was telling me I could see. Like, she was talking about her apartment, and I said, are there bugs? Do you have a bug problem? And she's like, yeah, how'd you know? So there were so many things that she would say and I would see, because I opened up that door to my psychic ability just from working with energy. So that's another good side effect, just like with meditation.
Very, very cool. And then a lot of people have out-of-body experiences tied in with near-death experiences or a traumatic sudden injury. You'll hear a lot of stories of somebody saw themselves on the ground and people trying to resuscitate them, or they were fell off their bike and they remember seeing themselves just laying there or being loaded into an ambulance, whatever the case may be. But besides sort of being jerked out of your body, your consciousness getting thrown out due to some sort of violent or traumatic incident, there are people who are able to study, master, and do this willingly. Can you talk about the ability to choose when you want to leave your body versus getting thrust out of it?
Yeah, it's like anything else. It's like meditation. It takes time, or yoga or anything else. It takes time to learn. But just like those things, you can learn to project out of your body. Some people have more of a facility for it. Some people came to the organization because they had experiences like that they couldn't explain. So they came to explore that. Whereas I came in the other way, wanting to experience it just because I wanted to learn more about myself. So I learned the tools that they taught at the organization, and they were very detailed. And if you follow those, it does work.
So a lot of skeptics out there will say, well, if you're laying in bed and you're trying to picture yourself raising up out of your body, that you can simply imagine it and trick yourself into thinking it, or maybe you fall asleep and then you have kind of a half dream. But as you said, you were sucked out of your body and you knew you were. Is there a way to tell for sure that it's truly happened?
Because it's more real than reality. It doesn't feel like a dream where you're unsure. You can control it. That's the main thing. Where you think, you go. So there's some that are less lucid than others. So those are a little harder to tell, but the ones that are extremely lucid, there's no doubt, because you feel so conscious in every way and aware of everything.
And then you talked about the vibrational states. That ties into sleep paralysis, which I'm not sure if you're too familiar with. Basically, it's like people can have OBs and stuff when sleeping. But can you expand on that at all? Like, what causes the vibrations? What exactly is it? Are you able to describe it in as much detail as you can so people that have had it can say, oh yeah, I've had that too? Because a lot of people brush it off as, oh, I was asleep and weird stuff happened. But you were awake in a coffee shop with your friend. Could you just talk about these vibrations?
I know I've learned with sleep paralysis, it's usually that you wake up when your body is not completely aligned. So that's why you can't move, and then you might get scared. The vibrational state kind of serves to, whether it's you're willing it to happen or it just happens spontaneously, it promotes the separation of the bodies. So if you picture a body lying there on their back, and then there's another, your soul or your spirit or psychosoma are above you, it's like you're attached by all these filaments of energy, but you're not completely aligned. And when we start to fall asleep, sometimes we feel like we're falling and we jump, kind of, and that's our body almost separating, and then we kind of wake up and it jolts us. Because our body kind of falls back into, one body falls into the other. So I've never had a spontaneous vibrational state, but I have heard that happens, and that would make sense that it was in line with when someone felt sleep paralysis or had some kind of strange thing happen to them, because they're kind of in that in-between stage.
Right. Can you explain for us what this vibrational feeling and the emotions that come along with it are really like?
So the one time that I had a really strong vibrational state, it created this euphoria in me that I felt like, I would tell people, my heart was like an orange that someone peeled all the layers off of, all the skin. And it was just raw emotion. And I was so euphoric that it was like otherworldly. And I remember getting on a bus, and this like elderly woman was like in front of me, and she was yelling at me for having my bag in the aisle. And I was just looking at her, smiling, and like nothing could bother me. She kicked my bag under the seat and it got gum on it. And I'm just laughing to everyone on the bus, made a bunch of friends. And I just realized then that this state, whatever had happened to me, I was above the normal frequency where I normally was, so that things that were below me just went right underneath, almost like a radio frequency, that I was higher than these other people. So I've always been trying to get back to that state because that's where you can experience like bliss and just not worrying about petty things that we worry about every day, that you hear someone says something about you and it hits you in the gut. Nothing was hitting me. It was like I was impenetrable. And that actually has a name with the International Academy of the Consciousness. Internationally, it's called IIPC. But it's called energetic springtime, where you have this renewal of energies. And it lasted maybe like 3 or 4 days. And I felt somewhat like that when I would finish a retreat or a workshop with them for the weekend, but never anything close to this.
Well, that is wild and awesome. And finally, do you have any tips or tricks for a listener who's at home and maybe trying to have an out-of-body experience, trying to astral project? Anything that might increase their chances of success or that you find personally helps you get into that mindset, that place?
Well, I learned everything there is to know about out-of-body experience from the International Academy of the Consciousness. It's iacworld.org. And they're all over the world, but they have a few offices in the U.S., one in New York, one in California, I think one in Miami now. And that's where I learned everything. So all the techniques. The main thing is to learn the energetic technique of moving energy up and down the body until you get it going so fast that it becomes the vibrational state where you're in that state that I talked about, where you just feel like you're plugged in like a light bulb. Not easy to achieve, but with practice it is possible, and that helps to promote the separation of the bodies.
So, Brooke did mention Dr. Waldo Vieira when she was studying everything, and for those unaware, I just wanted to kind of talk about who he was, because he's rather famous. He's a Brazilian dentist and physician who is more famous for his theories of projectology and the study of human consciousness as a non-physical phenomenon. So he believes that consciousness exists independently from the body. He bases these claims on various accounts of out-of-body experiences and other psychical phenomenon. He's written dozens of books about vital energy, parapsychology, OBEs, his own personal experiences, and he is actually probably one of the most prolific, if not the most prolific authors on the subject. He is also the founder of the International Institute of Projectology and Consciousology, the IIPC, and is a longstanding member of the American Society of Psychical Research. And as Brooke mentioned, and she was actually a part of helping kind of build this and transcribe things, Vieira assembled the largest library in the world on the subject of consciousness. It includes everything ranging from parapsychology to like Eastern mysticism, and that is a library that's open to the public in Brazil. So she kind of was under the learning tree of one of the greats. What were your impressions of Brooke's journey, I'll call it?
Well, first of all, that's awesome to know about who she was studying under, because context always matters with this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think part of it was like, is it a vivid dream? Is it a lucid dream? It's hard to tell. Just I was touching on it before. Like in 2012, I had some for 3 months straight, really, really intense dreams. And so sometimes it's hard to know for certain if she was awake or asleep, although she sounded pretty certain that she is awake. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff is just hard to comment on if you're not even there.
Right.
But I'm always interested in knowing what the scientific explanation would be of when people feel the vibrations. Not just like if a scientist is talking with somebody who is of clear mind and discussing this, if you take out the possibility of, okay, this person is crazy, I would like to ask a scientist, I guess, what would the scientific explanation be for someone feeling vibrations physically in the body? And I think she had commented on that, so I was interested in that part.
Well, yeah, I mean, she had a lot of, she had a cool story where she kind of wanted to learn about consciousness and ended up, as we said, in Brazil for months. And she had a lot of these kind of little stories happening. She did have the vibrations in that moment with the psychic friend she had when she was in Brazil at that research center, is when she said she was doing the practice of moving energy. She started falling asleep, and then she said, definitely catapulted out of her body at least 10 feet. She said, to your point, she was like, I was definitely not dreaming. She said everything was dark, and then she was like, don't think about your body, think about where you want to go. She kind of froze up in the moment and thought about her body too much and couldn't think of where to go and was sucked back into it. And she said, again, that was pretty real. She's convinced it's not a dream. One thing she touched on, which was a cool, I guess we can almost call it a subgroup or an offshoot of astral projection, is remote viewing. When she had that remote viewing incident where her roommate was like out at the beach and this car came with headlights, and she said like she was back in the room focusing on where could her friend be, and all of a sudden she had these bright lights in her face. So remote viewing is always intriguing to me, and that is, for those unaware, the practice of seeking impressions about a distant or unseen target. So you're sensing it with your mind. So in this case, she was trying to say, hey, what's my friend up to? And bada bing, she's hit with bright lights. So just really intriguing stuff. She's very knowledgeable. Obviously, like we said, studied with the group under Waldo Vieira and everything. So yeah, just intriguing to me. And one of those things too, where all of those little stories add up. I guess to your point, it could be if she is like in Brazil researching all this and around all these people and studying it, it's like, are you more likely then to have a dream or something where you think you have an OBE? Or did she truly have an OBE, you know?
Yeah, no. And I think it's definitely a possibility. I just like to lay out other possibilities as well out there. And also just kind of curious if in Brazil there was any drugs going on. But if not, and that could totally not be happening, then, if we take that off the table, then yeah, it's certainly fascinating. She sounds like a normal, credible person in general. So from my perspective, I'm certainly intrigued. But yeah, it's one of those mysteries. I mean, I won't know until I experience that.
Exactly, yeah. Like all things paranormal, it has to sort of be a first-hand experience. She's very genuine, very real. I think she probably would have told me if she was on drugs at the time, but that is a good thing to bring up because like so many stories, it's like anytime somebody's like, I saw a ghost, I was so drunk and high. It's like, well, did you though?
Like every single story that I hear of anything paranormal or questionable, the two things I always wish a TV show did was like give me two character witnesses and let me know what medication or drugs or any sort of intoxicants they were on. And like if you're drinking, you're not going to hallucinate necessarily unless you're drinking absinthe or whatever. But
right.
I always like to know two character witnesses and were you on anything? Just to know, just for the scientific background of approaching this again in the future.
Yeah.
Those are two things for any story I like to know.
Definitely. And I agree so much. I love the stories too, where to your point, 2 or 3 people, we all saw the ghost. We all saw this little alien,
right.
Whatever. We all saw Sasquatch. And that's what makes it so much harder with something like this, where it is like an individual experience. So even if 2 other people were there, they'd be like, yeah, her body was just there. And then all of a sudden she like jerked awake. So it's like with something like this, it's almost annoying how even if there are witnesses for an out-of-body experience, you can't really validate it. Although, in some ways, maybe you can, which we'll get to in our next 2 stories, which is a good lead-in. My friend Susan actually had a very interesting story about an out-of-body experience that she had.
The Brothers Mysterio.
This happened kind of as a result of dealing with the death of my father. I was having a really hard time, and I had a suggestion to go see somebody who does spiritual body work to help me release some of the grief and some of the bad feelings that I wasn't able to move forward from losing my father. So I went to this spiritual healer who was based in, I think he was doing deep tissue massage and also was leading me through some meditation work when I was there. I went to see him twice, and the first 2 appointments, that's pretty much all we did. And, he, helped me release a lot of, emotional things I had stored and just, get some more of the grief out. And just, it really was helping me on a physical and emotional level.
And it was during Susan's 3rd visit when things went differently than they had before.
But the 3rd time I went to see him, he said to me, okay, now you're ready for what I really want to help you with, which is understanding the existence of your soul. And I said, okay. And he said, that's going to help you more deal with your father, what you perceive as the loss of your father, than anything else. Because after you experience this, you'll understand in a way that you could be told 1,000 times, but until you have this experience, you're never going to truly, have peace. And because, the big part of me kept wondering, where is he? What happened? So I'm laying on the table. He does the same, really relaxation things. I mean, I'm in a state of, I don't know, semi awareness, in between that sort of, place in between waking and sleeping, that place that is almost dreamlike, but not really. I was lucid, but not completely. And the operative thing to remember here is he was wearing a turquoise shirt. So I'm laying on the thing, getting, relaxed or whatever. And the next thing I notice is all of a sudden, and my eyes were closed, but in my field of vision, I saw nothing but turquoise. And then suddenly, as soon as I recognized I was seeing turquoise, which I couldn't figure out what the heck am I seeing, I am on the other side of the room. And he's looking at me. And then I see that he's standing over a table. And I'm thinking this is like a hallucination or something. I'm like, what? Are we on some sort of journey? Like, what's happening? And then I look over, and he's like standing over this woman with dark hair, and she's laying on this table. She's sleeping. And I have this deep sense of love for her, like no one I have ever felt in my life. I thought, oh, there's that wonderful woman. I love her so much. And just as I was thinking that, he looks at me and he says, are you ready to go back now? And with that, literally, I was opening my eyes. I was sitting up on the table, and I realized that I had been instructed and brought into and out of and back into my body.
That is intense.
Yes, it is.
So my first question, you kind of see the turquoise, and then you kind of, the focus changes, and now you see it's the turquoise shirt. You're on the other side of the room.
Yeah.
When you say that, you don't mean you're not like floating above. You mean you're just literally like as if you were standing up on the opposite side of the room.
Yeah, which is why I first thought this is I was thinking some kind of like guided meditation again. Like, oh, now we're thinking about laying on a room and watching him do this or whatever. I didn't really know what was happening, and I didn't even recognize my own body in a normal way. Like, I didn't freak out like, oh my God, I'm laying over there. It was more like, oh, I just love her so much. It was really, really weird and really awesome.
Yeah. So then you said at kind of that early stage, he was looking at you. When he's looking at you, you mean he's looking at, not looking down at your body, he's looking at the projection, we'll call it, of you.
Right.
And then
he knew exactly where I was. Yeah.
So then he turns to you again and then said, are you ready to go back now? And that's when you came out of it. So when you sit up and are now back in your body, did you say to him, like, how did you do that? Did you see me over there?
Oh, he knew exactly. Yeah, as a matter of fact, the follow-up was, I opened my eyes and I said, I was just out of my body, wasn't I? He said, yeah. He said, it took a few times of you coming here to get you to the point where you could relax enough so that you could make that transition. But I had every faith that you were going to be able to do it. So it was, an accomplishment, for both of us in a way, because not everybody, is open and can be guided in that way.
And did you go back to him for any other sessions after that time?
I was so super happy and just mystically satisfied that I kind of felt like that was enough. And then weirdly also, all of a sudden I hear, through, a friend of a friend, Alan has moved to Hawaii. So he's not even really around, I mean, he comes back to me. It would be very difficult to try to reconnect with him. I did one time after that, and we just did body work and some healing when I had some other issue go on, but we never did that because that was, I really do believe that that was the beginning of me being able to get over the crippling grief that I had when my father passed away.
That was going to be my next question, was how did that out-of-body experience, how did that help you deal with that grief and kind of move on with your life?
Well, the thing is, I've always had a really, spiritual nature, and I've, educated myself a lot about, the journey of the soul, and I believe in the soul and some kind of afterlife and whatever. But until I lost my mother 5 years before that, and that was horrible enough, and I was living with that grief. But when my father passed away, I really got into a deep depression, and I think it was my physical body just missing being able to interact with him, to talk to him, to touch him, to be in his presence. And the thing about learning about the real true existence of my own soul and understanding that I am not my body, and that at some point when I separate from that body, the consciousness of me will move to another thing. I don't think I'm going to perish when that body passes. Once I learned that, then I can say now with confidence that my father is also in a better place. And the same thing happened to him, and his soul has moved on to something else. So I don't have to feel like he's just gone. He has just changed form.
That was Susan's story. Very cool story. She went to try to get some closure, as she said, after her father's passing. And Alan, who she was going to see and who she had done some energy work with and stuff, said, understanding the existence of your soul is very important to getting that closure. Until you experience this, you'll never truly have peace. And then he basically gave her a guided meditation that led to an out-of-body experience. So what did you make of Susan's story?
I think it's really intriguing. I've always been interested in going to one of those healers or classes or whatever that she was going to with that teacher. And interesting with the projection of the turquoise, that she could see that was the first thing. So it sounds kind of almost like you kind of blur into the other side, I guess. And then with the woman that she's just said she felt overwhelming love for, I find that very interesting, because it's I feel like the answer to so many things, when you break it down, it comes down to vibration, energy, and then finally just love. That seems to be the height of what everything is all about. So it seems to me like she tapped into something extra high level, and just after looking into so many of these stories. So it's interesting. And then definitely interesting in terms of how the turquoise, she sees the shirt, and then she's on the other side, sees the turquoise everywhere. So I'm interested just on a whole other level about what is that transitional point, which obviously, it was more so just the experiential part for her, but I thought that part was very interesting. Yeah, definitely. I also picked out how cool it was that she's staring at this woman, doesn't recognize it as her for a while, but she's just feels this intense love for her. She's like, oh my God, it's that wonderful woman. I love her so much. And like you said, it comes down to all you need is love. Wait, was she talking about herself?
Yes, she was looking at herself.
I thought she was talking about some random woman that she was... Okay. And I was like, wow, she just feels a whole lot of love for this person, which, again, coming down to the love feeling in general with the energy, that's very interesting now that I'm thinking of it that way. Yeah. So she was seeing herself, and she just absolutely loved herself.
Exactly.
Fully.
Before she even knew it was her, right? She basically is, she's laying on the table. Alan's there with his turquoise shirt talking to her. And then all of a sudden she's surrounded by this weird turquoise, comes into focus. And Alan is standing over this woman, and before she kind of realizes, I've left my body, she's just wow, I love this woman. And like you said, it's that basis of all you need is love. So that was super cool. And I will say again, I do know Susan personally. I can vouch for her. She's very real. And I like how she was even she wasn't immediately oh my God, I've left my body. She was kind of what the hell is this? I don't know. Oh, I love that woman. So very cool. And as you also pointed out, the turquoise, Alan was wearing a turquoise shirt, but then she's surrounded by turquoise. So I looked into it, and turquoise, which is a captivating sea green stone, of ancient times represents wisdom, tranquility, protection, good fortune, and hope. And ancient people believed in its profound power to protect, as well as its tranquil energy and its association with enduring love. So, could it be a coincidence that he was wearing a turquoise shirt and maybe that color is just what popped? Or does the fact that turquoise represents enduring love, tranquility, protection, hope, like all that ties into the reason she was there, sort of, which was to get closure. She said when this ended, she's like, I was mystically satisfied. I didn't have the need to go back. She actually said Alan had like closed up shop and like moved to Hawaii or something, so she couldn't go back anyway. But she found that closure she was looking for. And I mean, obviously dealing with death is tough. I always think about Ram Dass, who said death is removing an old shoe. So it's like it's not the end of life. It's just the next stage of life. It's a part of life. We kind of shed the meat suit we have on, but then we return to the infinite, which Susan said she got that impression too. She's like, he's not gone. He just changed form. I left my body. I didn't have to worry. Like I asked you, what happens when we die? She was probably wondering, did he go somewhere? Is he in heaven? Does his soul exist? Is he just lights out, game over? So she was able to walk away and say, like, wow, I have that astral form, my soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it. Alan was able to, like, pull it out and bring it back, which means that gave her the impression that her dad's spirit is again, gone into the ether and maybe still exists somewhere, which was super cool. And then another thing, like you were saying, it's always good to have a witness, somebody else there. I'm blown away by the fact that Alan turns to her and says, like, are you ready to go back now? And then she's like, zaps back into her body. And she's like, what the hell was that? And Alan says, yeah, it took a few times to get you comfortable enough to make the transition. Not everyone could be guided in that way.
Right. Yeah, and really, like with character witnesses, where I was going with that is just like two people like to interview afterwards to let you know that this person is sound of mind. Not necessarily that they had to be there, because there's so many experiences that people aren't there, but just to get like a character analysis. Right. Not an eyewitness, a character witness. I got what you're saying. Yeah. I think that's even more interesting, though, now that I'm realizing, because when in the interview, it sounded like she was saying, like, and I saw this woman over there. So I'm thinking there's, like, I don't know, like another meditational table, something going on next to her. So knowing that it was herself, I think makes it even more interesting in terms of the idea of that, like, high vibration of love. Because, like, with the idea of, like, coming out of your body, then, if you leave the physical behind, and if that highest energy form is love, and that's all she was feeling for herself, that's very interesting now that I'm thinking of it in that way as well. Yeah, definitely. And that also seems to be common. We did several episodes on near-death experiences, and a lot of the people that had died said it was almost the same thing, where you're kind of standing there for a second and you're like, oh, man, somebody get a doctor. This guy looks terrible. And then as they keep looking, they suddenly go, that guy looks familiar. Wait, oh my God, that's me. So it's like, I guess if you're not used to leaving your body, or, we're not used to looking at ourselves outside of a mirror. So there must be a very weird moment where suddenly you realize, like, wait a minute, that's me. But even before she recognized herself physically, she did have that energy, that connection, that love there, which is a beautiful thing. Yeah, for sure. And then I came across another very interesting, very unique OBE astral projection story from Jeremy, and he was willing to share it on the show, and this is Jeremy's story.
My name is Jeremy. I am 32 and I live in Melbourne, Australia for the past 10 years, but I'm born and raised in Singapore. The details are a lot hazier now than when it first occurred. I was 17 then, and this is a fact I can remember only because I looked up the event on Wikipedia. I think this was the peak of my adolescent OOBE phase.
Jeremy had a lot of out-of-body experiences in his youth, and this particular event he's talking about is connected to a very unique OBE, one that really piqued my interest and was the reason I reached out to him to come on the show.
The OOBE started like the rest of them. It all started off a dream that I could not really remember, but when I did become conscious and aware, I was lying in my bed, vibrating like crazy. It's quite odd because this occurrence would make most people wake up in fear, but I had become used to the vibrations by now and relished in the fact that it meant I could use this opportunity to project. All of this happens naturally and automatically, as if my astral body knows the drill all too well. I project as per usual with a rolling out of the body method, and as usual, my astral self takes a few minutes to orientate.
There are countless techniques for attempting astral projection. Jeremy uses the rolling out of body technique, where a person relaxes into a state of near sleep and then, not imagining but rather with a strong desire, attempt to roll out, stand up, or levitate and separate from their physical form without using their muscles.
When I project, I always feel sluggish, I feel lethargic, and my vision is blurry. But within a few seconds, I become normal. Usually, this is where I begin my exploring, and I am always filled with joy at the freedom the projection gives. But this time, I get immediately whisked away to the theater. It is not the cinema, but an actual theater, like one that would be used for plays and musicals and the such. There are heavy curtains, and lights are bright. Then the curtains close, and it becomes dark. I know there are physical people there, but I also sense other projections. I can't see them though. Then the spiders start crawling out the air vents, millions upon millions of them, and they start biting the theater goers. One by one, they all fall down. Immediately, I get pulled back to my body and wake up as mentioned. I write all this down in my dream journal, thinking nothing more of it as a weird projection experience. Well, they actually all quite weird. The next morning I wake up. I thought nothing more of the event, and it was not till a few days later that I saw a news article referencing the Moscow theater attack and how the special forces had used some chemical agent to incapacitate the terrorists, but it ended up killing some hostages as well.
This event, which took place roughly 5,230 miles away from Jeremy in Singapore, would come to be known as the Moscow Theater Hostage Crisis or the 2002 Nordost Siege.
On the night of October 23, 2002, Chechen terrorists took more than 900 people hostage at a theater in southeastern Moscow. The heavily armed fighters set up large bombs in the center of the auditorium. Chechen rebel leader Mofsar Barayev told the hostages that if Russian troops did not withdraw from Chechnya, the theater would be blown up. 3 days into the siege, Russian special forces released a gas in the theater, hoping to render both the hostages and terrorists unconscious. The use of the mystery gas and the botched medical rescue that followed are believed to have caused the deaths of more than 100 hostages.
In my mind, I made the connection that what I have seen, the pictures in the newspaper did not match my projection memory at all, but the scenario was oddly similar. I did not know of chemical agents at the time, so my mind had possibly interpreted this and produced a vision of spiders instead.
I asked Jeremy if he ever doubted or thought of alternate explanations for this experience. Could it have just been a regular dream and maybe a coincidence that the hostage incident took place and was so similar?
Yes, I doubt it all the time. It is possible that I had seen some references to news articles earlier that the hostage crisis was going on as the event took a few days to unfold. Could have been a regular dream or a coincidence. It could have been confirmation bias. It could have been a desperate grasp at some sort of link between disparate events. I was quite shocked and noted it in my journal that a similar event had happened in real life.
Next, I inquired if Jeremy believed in OBEs before this experience.
I don't know if I believe in OOBEs, but they happen to me regardless, and I really enjoy them. I first spontaneously projected when I was maybe 11 or 12, and it happened spontaneously ever since. It gets more frequent when I try to meditate, which I try to do often.
I wondered if this experience changed his views on the world and what might exist or be possible.
OOBEs changed my point of view of the world when they first occurred, but honestly, I am not sure what they are. I am a scientist in training, so I have a tendency to be skeptical about all of this, but I cannot deny that they happen to me, and I do experience it. Ever since they start happening, I have started researching OOBEs and related phenomenons like lucid dreams. Lucid dreamers and scientists will tell you that OOBEs are nothing more than elaborate lucid dreams, but I have both lucid dreams and OOBEs, and while they have some similarities, they also have some spectacular differences. For example, lucid dreams always start with one becoming aware whilst in a dream. It's like when you are driving and daydreaming and suddenly realize, oh, I am daydreaming, let's pay attention now. It's like when the return of awareness. Lucid dreams are also very, very vivid and lifelike. If not for this new awareness, I would not be able to differentiate a lucid dream from a real world. OOBEs, on the other hand, always start for me with the vibrations. They come on swiftly and strongly, and for the uninitiated, they can be very scary as they were during my first time. Seconds later, there is a clear feeling of separation from the body, either popping or sliding or dragging out. For me, my vision and physical movement are sluggish, but it does become clear. The world is real, but you cannot tell if it's real. It's hard to explain. Everything seems more magical and more alive, but less vivid. Lucid dreams, on the other hand, are very, very vivid. While the starting of an OOBE is sluggish, I often find myself moving in floaty leaps and bounds, and I sometimes have a hard time not floating. Again, quite different from the lucid dreams, where natural behavior, like walking, seems to be the norm for me, but flying is possible if you want to. At this point of time, I settle for the self-developed idea that you imagine your life as a computer. An OOBE is likened to one connecting to the internet and exploring outside the realms of your computer, while the lucid dreams is exploring inside your own computer's file system. I cannot corroborate any real information outside the real world when in the OOBE. I am not even sure if I am projecting into the real world, but I have strong feeling that I have left my body. I am not sure where or how, but that is my feeling. I have no proof except the shaky story I mentioned prior.
And finally, I asked Jeremy if he would consider this more of a premonition dream rather than a true out-of-body experience.
It was not a premonition, as far as I am aware. It was an OOBE. The other projectors there, and I felt like we were experiencing something unfolding.
The brothers.
That story comes from Jeremy. He was 32 at the time, living in Australia. He actually submitted it in writing, so it was read by Spencer Scott Holmes, who is from the Old Man Orange podcast, and he's also the creator of Pizza Boys with a Z, the comic. So want to thank Spencer for reading that for us, bringing Jeremy's story to life. A whole lot going on in this one. I'm going to say first, Jeremy mentioned a couple times he kept a dream journal. I think everyone should keep a dream journal. They come in handy when you're looking back at things. When you first wake up, you can scribble some stuff down and then refer to it. So that's the Mysterium tip of the day. Thanks to Jeremy. Always keep a dream journal. And now, Caitlin, let me know, what are your thoughts about this story? Because this was a wild ride.
Right. To fast forward to the end of his interview, when he was talking about how he's like a scientist in training or whatever, I thought that was definitely interesting in terms of, again, like kind of character analysis, just getting a feel for what he's like in general.
Right.
So I appreciated that a whole lot. I think it's interesting that this started happening to him when he was like around 11. It's spontaneously, he said. I'm not sure how frequent it was going on, but then to have that experience with the chemical agents, where he was saying, like, you know, he couldn't interpret the chemical part, so it was spiders. I wasn't quite sure how the two things were going to correlate at first. And so I felt a little wishy-washy on that, to necessarily equate the spiders with this attack going on in Moscow. But based on everything else he was saying about like the vibration feeling and how that brings him to another level. And like I said, having experienced some sort of vibrational feeling myself and not going further than that, but it seems like he's taken the step further multiple times.
Right.
So I'm intrigued. I can't say for certain that I felt like the spiders definitely equated to that, but I didn't have the vision, so I can't fully speak on that. I feel like.
Yeah, this one is so weird to me because as like Brooke had that remote viewing incident where she was able to see what her friend was seeing, and even Susan left her body but was still in that same room and was seeing physically what was happening there. It's really interesting to me how Jeremy, first, he sort of doesn't like choose where he wants to go. He doesn't say he's standing above himself in his bed and he decides to fly around. he said he basically gets sucked into this dark theater, which we know is thousands of miles away in another country. And it's like very abstract and almost like symbolic rather than he's seeing real things that he doesn't see. He says he senses other projections were in the theater, but he couldn't see them. And then he sees these spiders and they're biting people. And then all of a sudden he's sucked back into his body. But it's like if he was truly there in astral form looking at it, you think he would see the people, see the hostage takers with the guns. He would see the police. He would see the gas. And he even said when he saw like news coverage and pictures in the paper, it wasn't exactly what he saw. So that it's just interesting to me because unlike the other accounts where people are seeing physical things, he's almost seeing like representations of things.
Right.
So I found that very, very interesting.
I'm not sure how much I would think that it would be an out-of-body experience versus... I could see it being some sort of a premonitional type of a dream.
So I kind of had the same thought as you where I was like, oh, is this just like more of a premonition type dream? And now, so I asked him and he said like, no, it was a true out-of-body experience. I've had them before. I know the difference. And he said, I'm a lucid dreamer and I have OBEs and they're very, very different. He said that he can differentiate them because the vibrations kick in and then he's kind of popping, sliding, dragging out of his body. He said a lucid dream is much more vivid. This wasn't as vivid. He's in this dark theater. Obviously, things are kind of represented by other things, such as the spiders with the gas. He said he compares it in his own mind to like if you're a computer, like staying on your own local hard drive, that's a lucid dream, while an OBE is going out and surfing the internet. So, like, that's an interesting analogy. And to your point, this is kind of a science-based guy. He's using a computer analogy. But it's interesting, too, that I had the same initial thought you did, which is like, well, could this have just been more of a dream? But he's like, no.
Right.
I know it wasn't. I've had vivid dreams. I know lucid dreams. This was something I truly left my body. He says, like, it could have been confirmation bias. But again, like, the timing of it, even, to have that dream.
Right.
And then wake up and you see all the headlines about this hostage situation that took place in a theater and all these people died from gas coming through these vents, just like the spiders. So this is, it's definitely the most intriguing of the OBEs we've heard.
Right. No, and I think something that's difficult in terms of having science in this part is, only you know how you feel when something is happening to you. And, you know, like there are certain times that like I've had dreams where I know it's either a visitation or a dream, or I've had like a premonition dream before where I like absolutely know. And like there's nothing I can do except for tell you that like I know for certain that this is what it is.
Right.
And so for him, it sounded very interesting that he was like he felt when he read about the Moscow attack the next day or whenever, that it was definitely associated, that the two were definitely clicked together. And I think that's something that only he can know that. And I think we're going to be exhausted by trying to find a scientific explanation on that part, but that doesn't mean that I don't believe it.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that is cool, as I just said before about confirmation bias, it's like, it's cool that we live in a world with technology where you can have this sort of super weird OBE. He wakes up and he's like, what the hell was that? So he starts Googling stuff and you know, like you're able to look into it. So if I had that experience in whatever, the 1940s, I would wake up and be like, what a weird dream. But now you can kind of Google like theater deaths and all of a sudden all this stuff could pop up, you know. So Google Ask Jeeves gives you that ability.
Oh, the internet has changed everything in the approach of like paranormal stuff, and as well as like everything else in life in the world. But yeah, no, absolutely, because you can find so much more information and figure more stuff out and go down other rabbit holes now that we have internet instead of just like, oh, that was weird, and going back to bed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Because, yeah, if he's in the Philippines, he's in Australia, he probably... I mean, nowadays, too, we have the world news and everything, but, like, he might not have known about a Moscow theater situation. And so that is cool. But I guess the flip side of that coin is you do have to use your own filter system to make sure that you're not just searching for something and then validating what you want to find. In this case, the details line up so much where it is in a theater. There are people getting injured. There's stuff coming through the vents. So he was, you know, there is a lot of things that line up, so I'll give him credit for that. But I will warn anybody out there, like if you have a crazy dream about a ship sinking or something, you know, it's probably you probably get 9,000 results for ship sinking. Right. But if the dates line up and everything, so you do have to, of course, keep a healthy skepticism about you when looking into these things. But very cool and very unique story. Again, one that I just found interesting because he didn't see actual events. He almost saw like symbols for everything, which was it was interesting.
Definitely.
And then bringing things to sort of a close here, before listening to all of these stories, has this shifted your mind, your thoughts on OBEs or astral projection at all?
It hasn't solidified nor taken away, because I think I'm still in the same spot of until I can experience something like that. It's hard for me to say with certainty, but I mean, I also don't think that most people are delusional or lying as well. So I think I'm kind of in the same spot as I was when I began, just wanting my own experience.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in that same boat at the end of almost every episode. When so many people experiencing the same thing, it makes you wonder, like, how could so many people have it and describe it in such similar ways with the vibrations and then leaving your body. And like many things, you know, there's light and colors that the human eye can't see. There's frequencies the human ear cannot hear.
100%. Yeah,
Yes.
no, that I think that taps into a whole lot of what we don't know.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm always open. Like you, I would love to astral travel and be able to say, just like Jeremy, like Susan, like Brooke, be able to say, like, no, I know this was not a dream. I know the difference. I remember it. I saw this, but that also is half
Right?
the fun.
No, only you can know that.
Yeah.
Also, at the end of the day, that's what I mean. Like, there's nothing you can do or say. Just only you can know that or not.
Yes, absolutely. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your insight, your thoughts. It was a pleasure having you, and you're welcome back anytime on the Brothers Mysterium.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was very exciting. I love the show.
Awesome. Thank you again.
The Brothers Mysterium.
A big shout out again to Spencer Scott Holmes of the Old Man Orange podcast and creator of Pizza Boys, the comic. That's Pizza Boys, B-O-Y-Z, the comic. He read Jeremy's story for us as that was submitted in writing. The news report you heard of the Nordost hostage situation came from the Moscow Times. Music from this episode is from bensound.com as well as Purple Planet Music, purpleplanet.com, that's purple-planet. Our theme song is by the band The Never Grin. And if you yourself would like to be on the Brothers Mysterium, share your thoughts, your comments, you can do so by emailing us at thebrothersmysterium@gmail.com, hitting us up on social media at Mysterium Bros on Twitter and Instagram. Go to facebook.com/thebrothersmysterium. And we'd like to ask you to rate and review us on whatever podcast provider you use. And finally, as always, a big Mysterium thank you for listening to us.